Hey, what's up, guys? Today, I'm dealing with the question, should I look at my kid's chart or should I get my kid a birth chart reading? Now, this is an interesting question. A lot of people might think, how is it that we could assess a person's personality before they really become a person, right? And that's because we're actually more nature than nurture. Um, Over the course of our life, we collect these layers of conditioning and environmental influence, and they stack themselves on top of our core set of innate proclivities and predispositions. But nevertheless, that core remains the same. And that's what the birth chart determines. You can look at a birth chart from the moment a child is born, and then you can look at their birth chart at the end of their life, and the information is there. It remains the same. And there is a style of astrology called birth chart astrology that is generally in the business of simply describing the components of a person's birth chart. So it's basically a psychological description of the person's innate way of seeing the world and responding to the world. That's what a birth chart represents. So the information stays the same. As far as whether you should get your child a birth chart reading, that firstly depends on you. Have you had a birth chart reading? Do you understand yourself in that core way as a parent? The more you understand yourself, the better of a job you're going to do at parenting, because the more you know about how you react to the world, the more you know about your set of proclivities and predispositions for responding to the world, and the more you know about your own perception and how it's unique, right? So a parent who is not self-aware, who hasn't done a lot of self-work, is not only liable, but guaranteed to unload on their child, to use the parenting process to come to terms with their triggers, and those layers of conditioning. They're stacked on top of their core, and the parent ends up doing at least as much work, maybe even more work than the child does in terms of development. But really, for the parent, it's about unlearning things, right? So the more work you've done as a parent, the more consciously you can go about parenting, because the more you know about how it is that you and your child, as they are without your influence, going to respond to each other. So first, my first way of answering that is whether or not you should get your kid a birth chart reading is, have you gotten a birth chart reading yourself? Have you really studied your own chart? It's human nature that we want to like outsource our problems, use tools like astrology to validate our own problems rather than to take an honest look at ourselves, and really do the work. So the work for you is on you and about you first, But if you've done that, I absolutely recommend it. It'll save you a lot of heartache. It'll save you a lot of trouble as far as like getting to know your child's innate set of proclivities the hard way, instead of having to discover how it is their love nature might be, and when it is that they might start experimenting in that way in like early teen years or maybe later, in their 20s. It might be good to see there's going to be less shock along the way if you kind of have an idea of what's coming for them, or what style through which they express different attitudes, different parts of their lives. So I definitely recommend it if you've done the work on yourself. And I have done birth charts for several parents, children. Many of those parents were personal contacts of mine, although I've had a few referrals from people I didn't know. It's not something people typically think about very often, because once they get into astrology, people really get interested in their own charts, and that's a good thing. as long as you're using it for self-improvement rather than self-validation only. You know, it's okay to validate yourself to some degree, but you have to validate, if you're going to do that, you have to validate your bad decisions and your bad experiences just as much as you validate your good traits and experiences, you know. And by the way, I mean, I don't really think that there are bad traits and good traits. It depends on how you use them. There's only one thing that has the quality of being good or evil in this world, and that is the human will. The decisions we make are either good or evil depending on our intentions and our foresight. And to get to know your own birth chart gives you more intention and more foresight behind your decision. Look, I don't tell people what to do. I help them own what they do better, you know. Compatibility readings, I kind of have an ethic behind that as well, similarly to, you know, readings about kids. I highly recommend that people get a birth chart reading for themselves before they rope another chart, another person into that. Because not only is it more complex and, you know, kind of takes you outside of yourself as far as learning how to make better decisions within the context of a relationship, but it's also more expensive. As far as my price list goes to do a compatibility reading, because I'm dealing with 2 charts rather than 1. So yes, I do recommend that you get your child a birth chart reading. I do offer that service, but I recommend firstly that you have gotten to know your own chart pretty well, so that you're not seeking to avoid your problems by controlling your child and external variables, but rather so that you can more consciously learn to interact with your child. And, you know, things like communication style, how it is that your child is going to respond to different kinds of discipline, shows up in the birth chart. You know, people have different communicative needs. And learning needs, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's my video today on child or even infant astrology. Know yourself first, and then worry about getting to know someone else, whether that's your kid or your romantic partner or your friend or someone else. So that's the video today. See you in the next one. Cheers.